In Pulp magazine.
Thank you, Mike. Can everybody hear me in the back there? It might be best if you don't, but if you can, that's great too. We're, of course, finishing up our cake, and we're headed in for a really nice shadow panel coming up, so I'll be brief and concise, and yet hopefully we'll see some good things along the way as well. I have three lovely assistants today by the name of Lauren, Morgan, and Zoe, and if you haven't gotten the handout yet, that's the old professor's crutch to get all the information to you I can that you don't get during my ramblings of the speech. Make sure you get one from them, okay? It's an 8-sided thing. Some rough notes about a very, very large topic, a topic that is very, very timely today because along with paranormal romance and our love of zombies, it seems that in science fiction and in fantasy, nothing can really top what we're calling steampunk. A couple months back, I was in San Antonio talking to a big group of academics. They're an interesting lot. Good people, but they're interesting. And one lady came up to me after the presentation, and everybody had applauded and everything, and she said, "That was really wonderful, except you were wrong about one thing." And I thought, "Is that all? Just one thing?" And she said, "Yeah, the word steampunk is a very recent term. It was not a term that was used back in the 1800s, the Victorian era, and all that." And of course, she was right. That's absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, ma'am.
You got it. Took care of it.
But no, in a polite sort of way, it was nice. We're having fun here tonight, so that's what I intend. I won't bore you with long ramblings on my part, but instead I'll try to follow some of the models of what we had last night. The wonderful presentations by Martin and Steve. And then in between there, David Saunders and the lovely ladies, the granddaughters of the Pulp. So we're in quite a good company here. So I hope to do them justice for what was done last night. The PowerPoint today has just a number of images in it, and we'll take a look at these. If you notice the title of the handout, it has kind of a dime novel title to it, and you'll see that it talks about steampunk, and then it has a subtitle to it. Well, of course, that's very typical of what the old 19th century dime novels used to do. And it also gives me a little bit of an out, because after looking at this topic for the better part of a year, I realized how large it really is, right? So these are some notes and some overviews. The handout is designed to fill in some spots, and it's also designed to give you some ideas about things to explore in today's fiction and in past fiction. And there's some really neat things that some of you know. Is Randy Cox with us today? Yeah. Okay, good. I can get nervous already because Randy, of course, is a great expert on dime novels and legendary, as was Everett Lyler. His son Richard's not with us this weekend, but oftentimes Richard's with us. And I'll quit rambling and look at some pictures here. This is a cartoon from 1953. It's one that's appearing in my next book, my next science fiction anthology with Pearson Education and Prentice Hall. And I've always loved this cartoon. I think it's very, very timely. Even though Frederick Jackson Turner in the 1890s at the Columbian Exposition of the Chicago World's Fair, it was 1893, of course it was the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in America. They were a year late, so it was 93. He announced in a very long, very prophetic speech from the University of Wisconsin, he'd come down to Chicago and he said, "You know what, the frontier is closed, it's all done, it's over, we're done." Okay? Which was a very interesting thesis at that time. We know in the pulp community that the Western story is the basis, much like was said last night about pulps and comics. The Western story is the basis for a lot of our genre fiction today. A lot of our hard-boiled detective fiction, some of our science fiction, and indeed what today we're calling steampunk comes out of the Western tradition. So here's Charlie Brown. I don't know if you can read the cartoon, and the little girl comes up, and I'm summarizing here, and she says, "What's wrong?" And essentially he says, "I'm out of date. I still want to play cowboy, and now everybody's playing spaceman." Okay? And of course, we would go through a paradigm shift in the 60s. We've been kind of nostalgic about that with the last space shuttle flight just recently. Okay, we can look at the next picture for a second. There's the title, Steampunk in the Days of Dime Novels and Pulp magazines. It's a broad overview, and we're going to follow Martin's wonderful example and try to be concise here, and I promise I will. All of us have seen this picture before. This is a picture that is reprinted in E.F. Blyler's 8 Dime Novels, that really wonderful Dover book. It's not too hard to find on eBay anymore. I bet you there's even a few of them in the Pulp room downstairs you might be able to find. I don't know. I didn't see any. But this was a very, very famous early image of steampunk. Now, for a definition of steampunk, it came to my attention as the months of research have gone by that, guess what? Sometimes we know what is included in steampunk, but we also know what's not. So you can look at the handout a little bit, and you can see some of the things going on there. And the Steam Man of the Prairies was not only very popular, went through at least 6 different printings according to one of my favorites. I'm going to be biased here, but I've always loved his scholarship. Sam Moskowitz's stuff. Went through at least 6 different printings. And then Frank Reed, which was the first of many imitators, done by Towsey Dime Novels. We know that Dime Novels were, they were sporadically, again, Randy knows this better than I do, but from 1830 to 1860, they were kind of sporadic story newspapers. From the time of the Civil War then until pretty much through World War I, 1920s even, the dime novel was very, very important. And the history of all that is not only chronicled by Randy and others, but it's found lots of places, and it's really neat. Okay, there's some back of Frank Reed. Some of you might be familiar with Frank Reed, and if you're not, we'll keep going here. Thanks, Mike. You're doing great. Color, that means that we're in the 1890s by now, right? The 4-color process. Remember what the 4 colors were? 3 primary colors plus the secondary color green, right? They figured out? No, it wasn't. Tony?
Cyan, magenta, yellow, and K, which stood the black plate, which stood for tea plate.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. But this is in the 1890s, turn of the century, color dime novels. So we'll keep going here. And we come to find out that the Steam Man is not the only mechanism that's part of this steampunk era, but pretty soon there's going to be horses. We're going to talk about some other animals in a minute here. Thomas Edison Jr.'s Electric Spider, very, very good story. Excellent story. This one I found just recently is very, very neat. It's an electric ostrich. Okay. Good stuff. And all of this, here's a Jack Wright thing. We've got all kinds of underwater exploration, fancy machines and inventions by the young boy wonder. This one is an excellent story. Jack Wright and his electric stage. He fights the James boys with this electric stage. And he's got a pneumatic pistol in it. It's a really fun read. If you look at the dime novels, they were paid by the word, right? How can that be fun? It was formulaic, there were cliffhangers, all that. No, this is a really, really good story. Thanks, Mike. All right, now we get on to a treasure that I found, and I know some of you know about this already, okay? But for me, it was new. We know about Jules Verne. We know about H.G. Wells. We know about their wonderful, wonderful histories, literary backgrounds. We know that Verne was a very prolific novelist. We know that at the turn of the century in 1900, H.G. Wells was considered the most important social thinker in the world. This is an electric elephant, or a steam elephant. Have any of you heard of this story, the steam house? Okay, good. You're a tough group, yeah? Tony's already corrected me once, and we got, that's all right, that's what we want, okay? This was a great story. The steam house story was reprinted in the 60s in 2 paperbacks. You can find them. And The Demon of Kaupor and Tigers and Traders. And it's a lot of fun. 1880, so that's 10 years after 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And the story fits right in with imperialist England. It's very much part of the Victorian era, and here's why the elephant came about. Jules Verne was not, believe it or not, a very particularly wealthy man in the late 1800s. And the things that made him money that he was able to survive on were actually stage plays and dramas adapted from his novels. Well, one of the popular ones in England at this time, prior to 1880, was the stage adaptation in London of Around the World in 80 Days. Okay? And Verne was quoted in several places as saying that people came for one of two reasons, and one of the reasons was, in his words, was for the damn elephant. Everybody came because they wanted to see the elephant. And there was this fascination, you know, with this era of P.T. Barnum and Jumbo and all that kind of stuff. So he figured, let's put the elephant in a story of imperialism that would have made Talbot Mundy or H. Rider Haggard really proud, right? So it's a two-part, longer novel, and the story is really great fun. I've read it. Some critics have said, it's boring. It's just an adventure story, right? But it's a story of English conquest down in India. It's got a lot of nice political intrigue in it, and how can you beat a steam elephant, for goodness sakes, right? Thanks, Mike. We can go on. Jules Verne, of course, did a number of other things. We know the more famous, popular ones. Clipper of the Clouds. These are fun images, right? With all the different propellers and all the different things. Great fun. Dirigibles. And then H.G. Wells, this book, Ray's here. He'll be proud to know that I put good use to his book I got from him. This was from Ray Walsh's collection, The War in the Air. Well, we know all kinds of things about H.G. Wells also, but this is kind of one you don't necessarily see. We can keep looking at some of the pictures there. Yeah, great fun. Red Napoleon, Operator 5, Purple Invasion stuff long before it happens. Okay, and then what this all leads to then is all kinds of things. A series of adolescent children's books done by a couple of different publishers, Couples and Leon, and of course there, as Sam Moskowitz details, a lot of these owe their origin to Frank Reed, who owned his origin to the Steam Man of the Prairies. There was a lot of what Marshall McLuhan would have called rearview mirrorism back in his day, back in the 60s and 70s. So we can keep going through those. Those are great. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, fun stuff. Tom Swift. Primarily done by Howard Garris, but there were some exceptions at the end of the series under the Victor Appleton pseudonym, House of Wheels. Great stuff. Thank you. You're doing great, Mike. Thanks. The Argosy, one of our old favorites at PulpCon. You get the balloons and the great contraptions in the air. And there's even some elements, I think, without trying to define the term too broadly, of steampunk in some of the works of A. Merritt and even H.P. Lovecraft. There's some things, and of course that's for Steve right there. You know, there's some elements of robots and all that kind of stuff. You think of the movie Metropolis from the 1920s, the silent, wonderful film. Okay, you get some of these images, and you start to say, "Hey, yeah, that's really neat," you know. And before we finish up today, as we're looking at these pictures, I want you to see where this is today, how wonderfully popular this is. And there's other pictures. There's even better pictures from the Pulps. And I got to tell you a story about John Dennis coming up here. Aren't the people at Pulp on wonderful? You know, we got 4 guys sitting up front here, and they're pretty humble. They're not making the big money from this. They're kind of like teachers. And they're up here, and out of the goodness of their heart, these guys are working around the clock. You get emails all the time, and it's pretty neat. Even some aviation stories had some steampunk elements to them. I like that one with the wings and the propeller and the extra whirligig type things on it. There were some elements of astounding. Yeah. Mark Legua likes astounding. Yeah, even some, I got some wonderful E.E. Doc Smith stories. Did you know he created he was paid $5,000 in the Depression to create the formula for Dawn Donuts, which was a donut chain in Michigan in the 30s. Did you know that story? It's very cool. He was a chemist and all that stuff. Yeah, you knew that part, but I love that story about the Dawn Donuts. There's even a couple, I know it's a bit of a stretch, things in like Doc Savage that kind of harken back to some of that scientific element, you know, and some of. Okay, here's my John Gunnison story, okay? How can you not have a better pulp title and this kind of thing, right? Karen was talking yesterday about somebody asking her, you're telling her your grandfather wrote this story, Frederick Davis wrote this story, The Mole Men Want Your Eyes. What a great pulp title, right? And then I think of Scott Norris back there, and I think of the wonderful title of Harlan Ellison, who Scott is such a big scholar of. I have no mouth and I must scream. But Gorilla Gas Bags, it's got to read right in there, doesn't it? And I asked John one time, I said, all the wonderful replicas you do, I'm waiting for the Gorilla Gas Bags. For goodness sakes, it's Gil Brewer. He was a good noir writer and all this stuff. He said, Garyn, it's a really lousy story. He said that, I don't think he still has the intention to reprint it. But, maybe for me one day he'll do it. Here's the modern stuff, and we'll finish up in a few minutes here so we can have the good shadow people coming on. James Blaylock, English professor from California, good friend of Tim Powers, who also writes the steampunk kinds of things. The Digging Leviathan, Giles Peak, straight out of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Journeying to the Center of the Earth, right? And the Homunculus. How can you not like a title like the Homunculus, right? You got the little, you got the Igor character down in the corner, it's the Bride of Frankenstein all over again right there. Blaylock, great stuff. Got a book from Mike Stable, new Blaylock book. Reprints of K.W. Jeter, who's part of that, the Tim Powers Blaylock Circle. These are recent. They're fairly collectible paperbacks now. They were done by Daw Books in the 70s. Warlock Knight is a quite fun sequel to the H.G. Wells story. And then you got Joe Lansdale, great fan and scholar of the pulps. This one collects two of his steampunk westerns. Very good stuff. One of the most popular, important, somewhat controversial books of modern times is The Wind-Up Girl, with the rare distinction, like Frank Herbert's The Dune, earning both the Nebula and the Hugo Award. I've read this book. Have any of the rest of you read this book? It's very dark and it's very, very wonderful. Maybe it's dark because it's a little bit too real. Very, very good stuff. Very, very good stuff. These are the first of two books. There's going to be a third here next year. These are a lot of fun, too. I put a few of my students onto these books, and they went absolutely crazy over them, and they got some of the best papers of the year out of these two books. Everybody's in this one. P.T. Barnum, Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty, Mycroft. They're all in here, and there's a big dirigible, and it's just wonderful. It's in the handout. It's Tidhar. Yeah. Here's another one. These are very big sellers in the science fiction field these days. Okay, Spring Heel Jack is the first of a series coming. I like the second one a lot, The Clockwork Man. So all these new students, there's a Mike Resnick Frontline special. Boy, talk about dime novel references and westerns with Frontline and all of that. And you got the beautiful girl in the corset. The new comic book series, Lady Mechanica. Five Fists of Science. And I didn't want to go any further and end tonight without talking about the wonderful work that's been done by the new Pulp writers. And there have been a lot of neat things. It's an incomplete list, so please don't be angry with me if I don't get the list correct. But in the handout, there's some wonderful publishers, from Wild Side to Altus to on and on, who are bringing back some of these things. And that's just a cheap plug from but I love the cover. How can you not like Frank Paul? I was going to put a Norm Saunders in there, but I thought, no, maybe you better not. But I like the Norm Saunders stuff too. Some of it comes close to. So, anyway, very quick, fast whirlwind trip through what has led us today to probably the most popular science fiction genre right now. It sells very, very well, and it is the one that everybody is interested in. Not everybody knows where it came from. Are there any questions tonight?
You forgot League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
It's on the handout. But yes, and then the latest LSD-inspired Alan Moore creation came out this week on Wednesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I think it's 1969. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah.
New graphic novel is out. It's a longtime buddy of mine from Madison who runs a very nice comic store over in Madison. Told me a couple days ago. Just imagine what he could do if he didn't do all the damn drugs. Yeah. Yes.
I would just suggest that Philip Jose Farmer's The Other Log of Phileas Fogg
Absolutely
belongs on your list with
I like
K.W.
it.
Jeter's Warlock Night and so forth.
Great stuff. Very good point. Yeah, Phil Farmer. Great stuff. Yes.
Just you made me think some children's book series that had steampunk elements of all things are the Oz books with Tick-Tock the Clockwork Man.
Yes.
And now, just recently, they've come out with a role-playing game, Forgive Me, Oz the Great and Terrible, which is a steampunk, dark, evil Oz, which I'm not too fond of, but they took that from the steampunk elements in the original Bomb books and extrapolated from that. So.
Good, thanks. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, two things. First, a year ago, Barnes & Noble stopped carrying Weird Tales just as the new Weird Tales came out with two steampunk issues. I was wondering if you've seen those and you thought they were worth getting or not.
I'm afraid I haven't seen it, but I'm like most of us. I'm kind of a sucker for all that stuff. Yeah.
The other thing is before the session started, you and I were talking about Leon Stover.
Yes.
He was putting out. He was a professor of chemistry or something at some university, but he also put out some annotated editions of the works of H.G. Wells, and one of them, especially When the Sleeper Awakes, I saw the other one about War of the Worlds, but When the Sleeper Awakes, he went through the whole history of the various magazine and book editions of that novel. It also had all these essays, extra historical information in it. You know, it's a great book about that era of the magazines, published in early science fiction, end of the 19th, early 20th century. Brilliant commentary. I heartily recommend his book.
Sure. Some of those annotated editions are beautiful. The Walter Miller things. There have been 3 or 4 different translations of The Mysterious Island in the last 10, 20 years. And they're very, very interesting to compare and read. Mysterious Island has always been one of my favorites, not only from the old movie from the 60s, which isn't that old, but it's just a great story with Captain Nemo. We get more of his philosophy. We get the deathbed scene of Captain Nemo and the Mysterious Island, and there's a lot of neat things there. Yes, Rusty. It's good to see you, Rusty.
Since you showed the huge elephant, I wonder whether you have, in your research, run across a book that was aimed at school children called The Wonderful
They're full of electric elephant.
And whether you can tell me the lady's name who wrote the book.
No, but we've got to find that out. The Wonderful Electric Elephant. That's the name of it.
I have a copy of that, but I can't remember the name of it either. There was a sequel to it as well, where they go out into outer space with the elephant.
Good. Well, in the interest of time, thank you very much. It was kind of a whirlwind tour, but it's a great Thanks again to the good folks at Pulp. They do a wonderful job.
Yeah.